This is a bearing ball, and this is a bearing ball. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Sean. Today's video, we're going to be making a knife out of this 2.5-inch bearing ball. It is 52-100 steel. So how did I come upon this big guy? Well, I was ordering some material online. So I was ordering these guys, which are 3mm 52-100 chrome steel bearing balls, which is the same as that is a 52-100 chrome steel bearing ball. And normally I order 1/8, but I was looking for the best bang for my buck, and I ran into these 3mm ones. Now, what's the difference between 1/8 and 3mm? It's 0.1 something, very minuscule. So I could either buy 10,000 ball bearings at 1/8 for like $60, or I could buy 20,000 3mm ball bearings for $60. So I have a whole bunch of packets of these guys sitting in a box. As I was ordering that, I ran into this guy, and it ran me $10, which isn't bad. So I'm hoping with this build to be able to forge it out maybe into a large knife or a cleaver, and hopefully we get some of that chrome still on the outside. It would look cool. If not, that's cool too. But normally on knives, and let me go get one from inside, so hopefully that guy doesn't go anywhere. So take this knife for example. This is a twist ball bearing knife that I made, and depending on how you're looking at it, you can see some minor little lines right on the outside of the ball bearings, and they're very small. You might not be able to see them on the camera, but there's definitely just an outline around the ball bearings, and that outline is made from that chrome steel jacket that's put on these ball bearings. So I'm hoping to be able to retain a small portion of that, and maybe it'll make it look cool, or it'll just all blend in and turn black. I don't know, but there's only one way to find out. So I'm gonna go on ahead and forge out a I'm going for a cleaver, so I'm just gonna go on ahead and forge out a cleaver from that big old ball bearing there, and hopefully it comes out right. So at first I was hesitant to whether I was gonna put it on a holding stick, but after not being able to find anything to actually hold it with, I welded on a holding stick. And all I'm doing is working it down into a more reasonable shape, which in this case would be about a rectangle. From here we can start getting a little bit of our width and doing our preform. Now, speaking for myself, I always run into this issue when I'm making a cleaver, and that is finding the right time to be able to separate my handle material from the rest of my steel, to be able to portion out enough for a handle that's not too much but it's not too little, and at the right time. And so most of the time I end up overdoing it, and I do it when I've already thinned the material out too much. Here, due to the angle I was pressing at, I accidentally put a little bit too much pressure on the machine, so while the billet was heating back up, I ended up giving it a couple of tack welds to have it hold up for the rest of the session. Now that I have my handle material portioned out, I'm trying to get my width. One other thing I run into, and I keep telling myself I'm gonna solve this problem, but I never do, is that I need to buy more tongs. I'm horrible at making tongs. I've tried a few times before, and they come out being complete garbage. I definitely need to at some point take some classes or learn from somebody how to make actual good tongs, so I don't have to keep buying some. But I have a very limited supply of tools that I use, and I've been wanting to get more appropriate tongs for different purposes. And when I'm making big cleavers like this, it's hard to have something that I can properly hold my piece with, which is very important, and that saves you from a lot of headaches. And one such headache would be having tongs that are big enough to hold it from the blade portion, so I could try to forge the handle material back some and be able to save as much of the upper blade portion of the cleaver. Because of the way I did it, I ended up with a little bit of a bump, and I end up having to grind that material off later. And hopefully at one point I would like to be able to not do that. Another issue I run into is, since I only work with a hydraulic press, once I get to about a 1/4 inch thickness, it kind of doesn't like to move the steel before it draws the heat out. So it draws the heat out really fast, and I get very little work done. So here I'm moving to the hand hammer, and I'm just planishing it out, trying to get as much of the finish nice, smooth, and proper, while also trying to thin out the blade a little bit more so I can get the width that I want. If I had a power hammer, this would be a lot easier, but because I live in a residential area, I don't want to be that guy with a loud ass power hammer, especially since I work in the afternoons after my day job, and I like to minimize the noise as much as possible. So here I have a rough blank of what my cleaver will be, and I'm just portioning out as much of the material that I can keep as possible. I was going for a 4-inch width, and I ended up with a 3.5-inch width, which realistically speaking is pretty good for a cleaver, but I've always wanted to make a 4-inch cleaver hand forged like this. Now that I have the rough shape of my knife ground out, all I have to do is fine tune it on the 2x72 and get all those small areas up to my sharpening lines where I drew on it. I enjoy this part of grinding the most because the knife is at its softest, so it's the easiest it is to work at, so it just grinds off material like crazy, and I don't have to worry about overheating it because it's not heat treated yet. And to be honest, it's very satisfying to see how you hog off all that material when you're grinding it. It's very satisfying. I don't know how to explain it, but it definitely gives a very satisfying feeling of accomplishment. And I don't know, it might just be a guy thing where I like breaking stuff or grinding stuff. But yeah, it definitely gives me a satisfaction. A satisfaction that hand sanding definitely does not give me. So here I'm just stamping in my maker's mark, and to be honest, it does go a little bit deep on the hydraulic press. It's hard to control, and I go in for my quench. So I did my quench specifically like this because I didn't want to harden the whole blade. I want it to be soft, so I quenched the bottom part of the knife only. Alright guys, so we're at a temper. The knife looks great. It's nice and straight, quite beefy, but it's gonna be a beefy boy. I'm gonna leave this guy quite heavy, but it's because it's gonna be more of a chopping cleaver, so it's gonna be all around duty. It's not gonna be like a chef's knife cleaver that are super thin. All in all, it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna clean it on the wire wheel, and we're gonna give it a acid bath and some uric acid, and that'll clean it up real good and get any kind of residual scale or any of that stuff off that the wire wheel can't get off. And then we'll move on to our final grind. So here when I'm doing my final grind, I have to be very careful not to overdo my grinding because the knife's already heat treated. I don't want to mess up that temper, which is one of the reasons why I don't wear gloves when I grind. I like to be able to feel the heat in the knife, and when it gets too hot, I get to dip it in the water. Sometimes I do burn myself, which is still not hot enough to damage the knife, but I definitely do burn myself from the residual heat. So moving on to our handle material, I'm going to be using some Badook because that's what I have here in the shop, and I wanted to use a more rustic wood. I didn't want to really go with a synthetic or colorful synthetic piece of material, So I opted out for just using the good old-fashioned Paduke wood. I love the look of it, but working it is a pain. Now, the pains of working with Paduke aren't really what some might think. It is actually pretty easy to work with, machine-wise, to be able to grind it and cut it and everything. But the annoying part is that fine dust ends up dyeing your fingers, and they stay dyed for a couple of days, which is quite annoying. And it's really hard to keep your hands clean when you're working with that. So now we're moving on to our hand sanding with our hand sanding machine, and it goes pretty much how you would expect. So now we're moving on to our acid edge. Here's what I'd like to ask you. If you like this video, you like what I do, you want to help support, you can do that by liking the video, commenting, and checking if you're subscribed. The majority of my viewers are not subscribed. Some 89% of you guys are not subscribed, so be sure to check down there and check if you are subscribed. And if you're not, do me the favor of subscribing. I would really appreciate it, and it would help the channel grow. And be sure to check if you've hit that notification bell, because I know a lot of my viewers do not get a notification when I post a video every Sunday. So definitely check that out. I've gotten a lot of viewers say that they haven't seen my videos come out in a while if I stopped making videos or whatnot. Actually, one of my best friends also hits me up and he's like, hey bro, why don't you make your videos? And I'm like, I do. And his notification bell's on and he still doesn't get notifications. So if you don't have it on, you're definitely not getting notifications. So with that out of the way, we move on to our handle. Now that we have it glued up, I'm cutting off the excess on the pins. I choose to cut off the excess on metal pins because if you try to grind them off, you're going to create a lot of residual heat. And that heat can definitely overheat your epoxy and cause it to loosen up and weaken. And that is a very big no-no for having a handle stay on your knife. So that's definitely something we want to avoid. And as I was saying earlier, if you can see the table being on the other side of the 2x72, it is absolutely completely covered in dust, as is my shirt. This is a very dusty material, and in a future video I'll definitely show you how my fingers get whenever I work on Paduke. Not in this video or the next one, because I've already finished filming on the next one as well, but definitely in a future video I will be showing you guys if you have never worked with it before. So now with the knife done and sharpened, it's time to cut some paper. For this particular knife, I didn't show the sharpening because I did it on my kitchen table with some diamond stones and I forgot to set up the camera, but it definitely came out super sharp. So I decided to do the good old-fashioned napkin roll cut, and might I add, it is definitely very satisfying to cut with, especially for such a big and beefy knife as this one is. So here is a final look at the knife. I left that brute de forge finish on there. Has a little bit of the machine finish as well, and I definitely left it in there. I like it. I like the way it looks, and that is just a maker's preference. I know a lot of people don't like that, and I'm okay with that because I like it, so I do it. But overall, I'm very happy with the knife. Let me know down in the comments below if you like the knife. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate you, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.